Welcome everyone to the Poweshiek Cares annual meeting. I think I know more than half of you, but I'm Val Better. I'm the president of Poweshiek Cares. And I want to say, over the more than 10 years that I've been involved with Cares, I never imagined that we would bring a speaker here that would talk about transforming hog confinement to growing mushrooms. So we're really excited to have Tanner Faaborg here to talk about this, but before he does, you have to listen to me for a couple of minutes. First, I want to thank all our sponsors. We have many very generous sponsors who are helping to cover our annual meeting. The Iowa Farmers Union, the Sustainable Iowa Land Trust, and they have a table back there, and I think they have these wonderful thermal bags that they're giving away, so you can go back and get one of those. Iowa Faith and Climate Network. I've been working on this for a long time because they changed their name. PayPal, which is Jefferson Farmers and Neighbors, PCI, I tried to work on, I don't want to forget anybody. There's the Iowa Farm Sanctuary, which also has a table back there and some information. And we brought some really nice door prizes. I think okay, hopefully I didn't forget anyone, and a very generous support from the Center for Prairie Studies at Grinnell College. I also want to thank Grinnell Farm to Table, which has been great support for CARES and for this meeting. And with CARES has had a long relationship with, even when it was the Grinnell local food source, because we think it is the most healthy, sustainable alternative to livestock containment. So let's see, what's the next one? I've been working on this, so I remember. So I'm just going to tell you what's going to happen in the next couple of minutes. Oh, we're going to be here more than an hour. After Tanner gives his talk, we'll have time for questions, and then we're going to do door prizes, and we have some really nice door prizes, including some of the 1100 Farm special mushroom coffees and tea, coffee and chocolate, and then after the door prizes, we'll invite you to have some refreshments, check out the tables, including Grinnell Farm to Table, which has a lot of information and products out there, and just mingle. And if you would like, you can stay for our very short business meeting when I will introduce the board members, and we will also elect members that are new board members and board members that need to be renewed. And then I think that's it. That's all I needed to tell you. So we're going to have one of our board members, Tatum Watkins, introduce our speaker tonight.
Hello everyone, I'm Tatum Watkins. I'm on the CARES board. I'm also a student here at Grinnell, but I'm also an Iowa farm kid. So I'm really excited to have to introduce someone today that's going to talk about transitioning a farm from a non-sustainable CAFO operation to something that's very sustainable and also really creative. With that being said, I'm excited to introduce our speaker tonight, Tanner Faaborg. Tanner is the founder of 1100 Farms, a 25-acre property in Hamilton County that has transitioned from using CAFOs for factory farming to sustainable mushroom farming. Additionally, Tanner serves as board president of Urban Ambassadors, a Des Moines-based nonprofit dedicated to urban sustainability. With that being said, please join me in welcoming Tanner Faaborg tonight, and he will tell you more about that.
So much. Thank you so much for Poweshiek Cares for having me, and thanks for being here. Wow, this is quite the crowd here. How about you all give yourself a round of applause for showing up? I mean, when you want change, that's one of the first things you do. You need to show up. So really, thank you for showing up. Yeah, do we want to get just the front lights turned up, and we'll be able to see this old hog farm. So yeah, this is the hog farm that I grew up on long time ago. So basically, what I'm going to talk about is some of the things maybe you haven't heard. There's been, when you talk about CAFOs, a lot of you probably already know the environmental impact and the CAFO proliferation and just the negative effects of it. But I'm going to be talking about just a little bit of history, why our family got into it, what it was like, and why and how we got out of it. So it started a long time ago, late 80s. I actually grew up for a few years in Nevada, and my parents really, their dream was they wanted a big family and they wanted the homesteading lifestyle. So really, my dad was a welder. He didn't make much money. We're just kind of below the poverty line, but I didn't really know it. They saved up money basically, and they found an old farm, kind of rundown house with a few rundown buildings on it. We moved there when I was 3 years old. We're very self-sufficient. My mom made a lot of her clothes, as you could tell. Didn't have the best style, but it was very cost effective. And yeah, they moved there basically with they had a station wagon and $500 in their pockets. And like I said, rundown house. It was a fixer-upper for the buildings. But we had a great time. We got to work right away. We had a massive garden. So pretty much every meal that we had something from the farm. So we were very self-sufficient. It wasn't really to make money. It was more to just sustain ourselves because we needed the food. We needed to eat. We needed to heat the house. We'd have to go around and collect firewood, collect wood, fallen limbs after storms, and put it in the wood-burning stove. I know a lot of that's kind of romanticized now, but back in my youth, that was really just what we had to do to heat the house, to put food on the table. We had to have a big garden, and you can see in the back there we had some orchard. We had a fruit orchard, so we'd have apple trees, pear trees. We'd make applesauce, pear sauce, apple pear sauce. We'd can everything. If you went in the basement, it looks like doomsday kind of scenario. We'd have everything. So we'd have a surplus during the season, then we'd can things and we'd have it in the basement and have plenty for the winter time. And we also had some livestock, and there's me on the tractor driving around. They put me to work early, definitely. They enjoyed that free labor. We had, so it was a small farm. It was 25 acres. Originally, my parents, which just seems impossible now, really. I mean, they married right out of high school. They saved up, for a few years and were able to buy an acreage. And then it was 25 acres. Part of it they rented in the alfalfa field, and there's a little creek going through the prairie out there in the pasture land. And we had some cows. A lot of it was, some of it was just for 4-H. We were active in 4-H and Boy Scouts and things like that. And it was good life. It was good life. It was a lot of work, but it felt like everything had a purpose, and we're excited about the work that we did. And it didn't seem like a job. It just seemed like this makes sense. And I really enjoyed, going out in the morning and getting eggs from the chickens and collecting that and helping my dad with the hay and things like that. And we'd show, we had some cows out in the pasture. This was Curly, originally just a bucket calf that lived there for a long time. So basically, we had livestock, we had animals, pretty much everything at one point. We had cows, we had some pigs, we had chickens, we had geese, ducks. I think we had some rabbits for a while, a pet raccoon for a little bit. There was Petey the possum. we're very attached to all the animals. Pretty much every animal had a name. We felt that connection. Even, with the chickens, I remember one day, devastating. It was the fox came in the chicken house and got to all the chickens except for one. It was Chicky the chicken, and we nursed him back to health. And Chicky lived on that farm. I swear, we should have called Guinness because that chicken probably lived longer than any chicken in the history of the world. And we had some sows, and we'd have some piglets, and it was kind of an indoor. This was just with old buildings, not really, necessarily suited for this. This was an old cattle ranch, actually, and then that foreclosed, and I don't think anybody had lived in the farm for about 10 years. So we're constantly fixing things up, and we had some pigs. We did, some of them. It seems a little weird maybe to some people, but we did, butcher some of the pigs occasionally, and so we'd have some meat to eat. Yeah, definitely felt that sense of connection. Had the chickens, and that's kind of we had these trees right there, and then so everything was going great, but I was getting a little older. There was another baby. My younger sister was on the way, so it was 5 kids, and we're doing fine. But my parents started thinking to the future, and just little things like we're starting to play sports, and we can really afford like new shoes or gas to go to basketball games, and then a big goal of my parents, they didn't go to college, so a big goal of theirs was they wanted to help send their kids to college. So they started thinking about, well, we love this lifestyle, but I don't know how much longer can we do this. And that's when Wendell Murphy came knocking on the door, literally from North Carolina. It was Wendell Murphy and Murphy Farms. They were some of the first in North Carolina that kind of followed suit. They followed after the CAFOs of poultry was kind of the first thing in North Carolina. And they had a feeding operation. They had some problems, and then they thought, well, why don't we contract out? They had money, and they said, well, let's what if we supply people with the building? We'll supply the pigs, we'll supply the feed, and they do all the work. And they started that kind of contract farming. At the same time, Wendell Murphy was a politician, and he was also friends with many politicians, and they started lobbying heavy for different rules and regulations. So basically, they took away the state's ability to restrict air pollution or water pollution. Wendell Murphy got caught giving 25 times the legal amount as you could for lobbying efforts. Nothing ever happened. But they were making a lot of money, and they wanted to move to Iowa because Iowa had a lot of feed. So it's kind of a natural place to go. So one of the first places they went was my farm. They saw that there was some land there, and we had some pigs. And they said, they set up a meeting with my parents, and they said, hey, we'll help you with this loan. We'll build these 2 buildings holding 1,100 head each. It'll be a wean to finish operation, so you get them at about 30 pounds. You'll take care of them until their market weight at about 280 pounds. And you'll be paid, it was about triple of what my dad was making working his ass off as a welder and just swinging a hammer all day. And so it sounded pretty good. They needed money, and it sounded pretty good. And at that time, there was nothing to compare it to. So there's nobody to go ask, like, well, what do you think about this? How do you like doing this? Or it was different than it was now. So my parents, they thought about it, and they said, okay, this sounds like a pretty good deal. Let's do this. We'll work basically work for free for about 10 years, and then they'll pay off the buildings, and then they'll be making some good money. And then they'll be able to help their kids go to college. And then maybe someday they'll actually be able to retire. So that was the plan. So they drew up the contract and they signed it. And I remember we always used to go camping. Our vacations would go to Pine Lake and we'd go tent camping. And we decided, yeah, let's go right when they start construction. We don't want to see that, so we'll go camping. We come back and right away there was something that was unexpected. There was all these beautiful kind of mature trees, as you can see back there, and they took down all those trees. They took down all the trees, which I still to this day don't know why, but it seemed like an omen that just things maybe weren't going to turn into, what we thought. So they built them pretty fast, and like I said, two hog confinement buildings, about 60 feet wide, 200 feet long, 1,100 head each, and we got to work, and it was different. Right away, it was very different. It was obviously the pigs didn't have names. The working conditions were not pleasant. It was definitely, something that we didn't really enjoy. It was a job. And things began to change. I mean, we lost diversity in the farm because we didn't really have that enjoyment anymore. We're so exhausted and there's so much work to be done with the hog barns. We just slowly, as us kids, we're like, yeah, we don't, do we really need these chickens? Do we really need this? Do we really need the garden to be that big? We're making, my parents were making a little more money. Maybe we don't need that garden. Maybe we don't need this and that. And just the attitude every year just slowly kind of changed. And it definitely lost that joy. And I'll just speak a little bit about just the day-to-day with running with contract farming with CAFO, with swine CAFOs. It's not enjoyable. You walk in, really the first thing you do is you have to go from pen to pen and you have to find the dead pigs. And there'll be 2 or 3 different sizes. There'll be maybe a 250-pound pig that you have to go in there and drag out and drag to the dead box. And it's not fun stuff, and it's dusty conditions. We tried our best to do what we could, but it was, it's just not great. You got to, check on the waters and check on the sick pigs. You got to take the sick pigs and put them in a special pen and give shots. And then, you get them in at 30 pounds. And 5 months later, their market weight about 280 or 300 pounds. And then the semis come in and somebody goes and they mark the ones that are market weight. You don't take them all at a time. So you got to go in there with panels. It's always in the middle of the night. I don't know why it's always in the middle of the night. And you go in there and we'd all just go in there and we'd have to sort out these pigs. And you'd fall down, you'd get bruised knees and injuries all the time, and just not a great environment. But the problem that happens is a lot of people get into these situations and they don't know it's going to be that way. My parents really didn't know, we didn't know, but once you're in it, once you're a contract farmer like this and you make this investment, it's this treadmill. You're in this treadmill that's really hard to get out of. So way back when, there was, my folks were complaining, and of course, us kids, we didn't like it because mostly it's not fun. It's hard work and it's not enjoyable. But what do you do? So eventually the kids, we left the farm, and then this is the worst part. Every day, we'd walk down to the hog barns and we see this open pit lagoon. So the pens were divided, so there's solid concrete, which we'd have to try to put feet on and things and keep that dry, but it always get wet, and we'd go in there and scrape it every day and try to keep that dry and put it into slats. And the manure and the waste goes into slats. It goes in the ground. It goes in gravity-fed PVC piping underground, and then it goes into this open pit lagoon. And that's another thing that my parents didn't think about. What do you do with that? There's only one thing to do with it. You have to pump it out. There's nowhere you could take it. And that was another thing where, just the lack of autonomy with contract farming is one of the worst parts about it, because there's not really many options on how you want to farm, things you want to do. You have a strict contract and you have to do these things. And one of them is you have to get rid of this waste. So even though it's very valuable as fertilizer, people, surrounding farms knew that, well, we didn't have a choice. So the deal was they, pump it out for free, but they'd get that fertilizer, but they don't want to go very far. So all this manure just goes spread around in the corn and soybeans around the property twice a year. And which obviously, terrible environmental impact, terrible smell. And then eventually the farmers, some of the bigger, as consolidation happened, some of the bigger farmers, big ag kind of took over, and then they would say, hey, we're gonna charge you to take this. So eventually we had to start paying people to get free fertilizer because they didn't care. Growing up, I mean, we had some good, when I was younger, we had some good neighbors growing up. But this cycle was happening where CAFOs started to spread like a plague. They were everywhere. I mean, they just started being more prevalent and more prevalent. And what was happening is a lot of this consolidation was happening in the ag industry. And people were buying up, people were buying up a lot of land. And then the younger generation, they didn't want to do this. They didn't want to farm like this. So eventually, farmers would pass on. The younger generation didn't want anything to do with it. Big ag would come in, they'd buy the farm, the acreage, they'd buy maybe a 40 plot or 80 plot, and they didn't want the acreage, so they'd tear it down. So, I mean, there's three family farms just within 1 mile of where I grew up that aren't there anymore. And you know what is there? CAFOs. There's 3 hog confinement buildings to the east, and there's turkey barns to the west. And then a lot of people would want this just for the fertilizer. So they'd put up, there's all these incentives to have these CAFOs. Just like that legislation that was being passed in North Carolina, that same legislation was being passed in Iowa. And there was just very few restrictions. And with that, it was a very sad thing. We'd just lose family farms, and then we'd have this population loss, and then the schools would be smaller and smaller until just shortly after I graduated high school. My high school went broke. There wasn't enough people, so my high school doesn't even exist anymore. So eventually, like I said, obviously those kids moved out. I went to University of Iowa. I developed a passion for sustainability, and kind of a long story, but did some traveling, had some other experiences, traveled abroad for a few years, came back, and then I decided to make Des Moines my home, and I started working on sustainability initiatives. So I joined a nonprofit. I was doing some other sustainability work professionally, working on more urban issues, environmental issues. But it was killing me that I was in Des Moines, 45 minutes away from the farm, but those CAFOs were still there. Those hog barns were still there. and I was doing all this sustainability work, you know, in the weekdays, and then I'd have to go home. My mom would call or something happened, and I gotta go home and help with these hog barns. And it was killing me. And I said at the same time, my parents didn't want to do it anymore. They with so many more CAFOs, they didn't want to do it anymore just because they started to realize the environmental impact. But also they were getting paid much, much less. They actually made 20, they were making more about 20 years prior. Can you imagine that? Working hard at something, and then 20 years later, you're making less money. But they had this problem. They paid off the loans. This is their retirement plan. They have the infrastructure. It's right there on the farm. They talked about selling it. We didn't like that. All the kids went crazy. What? Sell the farm? No, 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 no. And they didn't know what to do. And I said, well, what if we repurpose the barns and we do something else? What if we find a different, what if I find a different business model? Would you guys be willing to make a change? Or if I found the funding, could I buy this and we keep it a family farm and we do something else? And they said, of course, if you find something, sure. But I don't think they thought, it was a realistic thing at all. So I kind of went along. This is about maybe 5 years ago. Didn't make much progress until I stumbled upon a nonprofit called Transfarmation. Transfarmation is their parent company is Mercy for Animals. They created Transfarmation to help farmers transition away from CAFOs to a more sustainable plant-focused business model. And it was great right away. Initially, they hooked me up with some consultants, and we started looking at everything. We started, well, what if we have microgreens? What would that look like? What if we do tomatoes, different specialty crops? What if we did this and that? Then came upon mushrooms, and mushrooms blew my mind. I didn't know anything about mushrooms. I'll be honest, I didn't know anything about mushrooms before getting into this, but I went down this mushroom rabbit hole that I am still in. It's so fascinating. It's just the versatility of it, the medicinal benefits, the fact that you can have fresh produce, which is something I really wanted to do. I want to, some of our goals are just the diversification of the ag sector instead of this, instead of just row crops and CAFOs. Let's diversify the agricultural sector. Let's localize the food economy. I mean, it's ridiculous that we're importing all this food. I mean, why are we importing all this food when we can grow it right here? And why not diversify while helping family farms and having more family farms? Because as this consolidation has happened, like I said, we're losing the family farms. We're losing population in the rural areas. And that's creating such a culture drain. And the people that are staying are so angry. There's that loss of identity and that loss of culture, and people feel it, and they don't always react in the right way. A lot of it, you might see some of it in politics. You might see some of it in people express themselves in different ways. But a lot of it is stemming from just loss of opportunity. There's just fewer and fewer jobs. But people that are from there, not everybody. Maybe you'll say, oh, why don't they just move to Des Moines, move to Chicago, move somewhere else? A lot of people don't want to move. They've been there a long time. They like the lifestyle. They want to farm, but there's just not opportunity. So I learned about mushrooms, and I thought, okay, here's something I could sell the fresh produce, but I could also focus on the value-added products, which there are so many medicinal benefits of mushrooms. And a big way to get that is through certain extraction processes, in making value-added products. And that's something also that you can make pretty good margins. You could have a national audience because it has a longer shelf life. So you could make sales in California, New York, Florida, all over the place. And in so doing, you can create jobs. And I thought I saw that as a real possibility. And I was the only one until I talked to Transformation. Before that, it was definitely laughed at. My family thought it was crazy, but I forged ahead. And so it took a while to convince, because that's the big thing. One of the big things you have to do first with family farms, you have to get buy-in from the family. And you have to get by, and there's going to be people that are saying, not just this is unrealistic, but they're going to be partially hurt by it. And a lot of farmers, when you talk to farmers, when you talk to people in this situation, the worst thing that you could do is demonize them, because it's a lot of them see, like my parents and I saw the harm that we were causing, but at the same time, there's a certain pride there. There's a certain pride in working really hard, providing for your family, putting food on the table, especially when you come from nothing and you've been through the struggles. So that was my first big challenge. I didn't want to offend my parents. I didn't want to demonize them. I didn't want them to feel guilty. I didn't want my grandparents offended. They had pigs. They had row crops. My whole family were farmers. Everybody. My older brother's a workaholic. He worked for Iowa Select, who we were contracting with, and he was in charge of, I think, 70,000 pigs through multiple sites spread around 3 counties. My brother was a swine nutritionist at Iowa State. My twin sister they have a cheesery, and they have grass-fed dairy. They have a dairy farm. And so I had to convince these people, hey, would you guys be on board with doing this, getting rid of the pigs and starting something that's a gamble and that's completely different? And so I had to do the work. And what Transformation helped me with, they were selecting 8 farms in the country to give a little bit of seed money for a pilot project, but then also help with just educating me on mushrooms. Because like I said, I didn't know anything about mushrooms. I got enrolled in a class at Cornell in Ithaca, taking online classes, learned everything that I could, read every book that I could, looked at every YouTube, and just soaking it up, everything that I could, and just wrote everything down. What are the benefits? How, and just created that business plan. And after a while, things started turning real, and I started this pilot project in this barn where it previously held pigs, but a tornado had taken it away about 7 years ago. And my folks had some insurance money from that. So we used insurance money and we built our own insulated building here. I think it's about 50 by 60 feet or something like that. I should know that. But I said, okay, let's not delve into, let's not jump into the deep end with retrofitting right away this massive hog building. Let's start with growing on a smaller scale. So I bought the tents. I said, okay, let's have kind of a tent system, and let's house that in kind of a greenhouse plastic. So kind of devised this system. It's a little funky, but I needed it in this building, and I thought, let's have this greenhouse plastic. We got up on the rafters there. We drilled holes in the beams there and had cables coming down, attached those cables to this greenhouse plastic, and then hoisted it up like so, and put tents inside it, trapped my mom in there for a bit. Learning as I went a little bit. Most of it was planned, but had to figure out a door, how we're gonna get in that door, and kind of develop a system like this. And it works. So just a bit about mushrooms. So really with mushrooms, there's just a few key things that you need with mushrooms. You need environmental controls. You have to have the right temperature depending on the species. You have to have high humidity. I'm talking a smoke show, like you walk in, sometimes if the humidifier is going, you can't even see anything. And you have to have the right CO2 level. So you need that right air exchange. Because as these mushrooms grow when they're fruiting, they just give out this massive spore load. And for the lighting, you basically just need blue LED strip lighting. So we're able to kind of devise an HVAC system, pretty easy HVAC system, where we could get those environmental conditions. And everything is hooked up to Wi-Fi and it's an automated system. So if it's too cold, heater kicks in. If it's too hot, the portable AC unit kicks in. And then CO2 level, we got an exhaust fan, and that's bringing in fresh air from outside, kicking out the old air. And then you need to clean it a lot because contamination is the worst part of it. So I wanted to do this with, there's different ways you could do this, but basically to take you through the process of making mushrooms. So to be honest, I started with just buying ready-to-fruit blocks because you could do that. You can buy ready-to-fruit blocks and they're very expensive. And some mushroom consultants were kind of telling me, hey, you really need to do that for a while to learn it. And then you can, maybe in a year or something, you could start, making your own blocks. And no, I bought those ready-to-fruit blocks like twice. And I'm like, I'm not spending that money again. I'm not spending $25 on this when I could make, a block for about a little over $2. So what you need for mushroom, you need substrate. So it starts with a substrate. For oysters, organic oat straw works really well. So it's oat straw, it's kind of hollow. So, and then you add soy hulls. So you could do it with just the straw, but really to get you better yields, you could add different things. So we experiment with different things, but a big one and a popular one is soy hulls. So you do a combo there, but first you have to sterilize it. So an easy sterilization process is you submerge it for overnight for about 24 hours underwater in this tank with hydrated lime. Just a little bit of hydrated lime and just this water solution, and kills all the bad stuff. So from there, you take it and you gotta mix it in it. So that's for oysters. For lion's mane and for reishi, it's wood pellets and soy hulls as well. You add some water, you mix it up. There's my brother Tyler. So yeah, so things were looking good. I kind of got this system going. And then my brother, who had been laughing at me the whole time, actually quit his job working with pigs. And that guy, the guy's a workaholic. He was actually making really good money, but he was having health problems too. He was having a lot of health problems from being in that. And he wanted out, but he was just too, I don't know. He didn't have any other options. He didn't go to college, and he just didn't have, he wanted to live. He bought an acreage out there just 5 miles from the farm, and I think he wanted out for a long time. But that's what he grew up doing, and he just didn't know like what else to do around there. But then eventually he joined the team. So he's part owner, and really happy just to be working with him and happy to have him on the team. Mostly because, like I said, he's a workaholic. So all he does is stay there and work all day. So yeah, I was saying you mix up the substrate. You either sterilize the straw or so there's different processes. One is you mix up the substrate and then you need to sterilize and then you inoculate with the spawn. So right now, we buy the spawn. Think of spawn as like a seed. You put the seed in the substrate in about 5-pound blocks. 5-pound blocks with plastic over it. And I can't wait till somebody develops something other than plastic. It drives me crazy. I know that it's plastic, but it seems like we might be able to make that change soon. And then we have, for the lion's mane and the reishi and things that aren't oyster, we have this inoculation tent. So that has to be extremely sterile environment. I'm talking surgically clean. Because during that process, you do not want anything infecting it. You don't want any contamination. Because you have just one little thing get in there at that stage, it will ruin the whole batch. It'll spread like crazy. You'll just lose the whole thing. And it's not fun. It was very sad to work on a whole rack on 35 blocks or 40 blocks and then have to throw them away. So with this method, we use the autoclave. So that's just it's high pressure and high heat. And in about 2 hours, it kills everything. Then we inoculate it with the spawn. Then we put it in the incubation tent. So for most of the mushrooms, it takes about 10 to 12 days for that mycelium to really start taking hold. Think of the mycelium like a rooting structure. It starts to kind of eat that substrate. And then you have what's called, that should be, have that reversed. Then you have pinning. So that's a very exciting sign when you put it in and you see the pinning. Yes, it's working. So that will grow from that stage right there in about 10. It'll go for a little bit longer, and then you put it in that tent too. Not many environmental conditions. It's about 72 degrees, a little bit of air circulation, nothing crazy. Then you put it in the fruiting chamber. So the fruiting chamber has different temperatures, and that's when the fruiting body really starts to pop out. And it's pretty trippy in there because there's lots of different crazy looking mushrooms, and you got the humidity coming up. You got the blue lights going on. It's fun. So the fruiting, but that has to be really clean too. So a big part of it is you got to go in there every day and you have to check all of the blocks for contamination because it'll still happen there, but you got to take it out right away. So you got to scoop it out and then spray a little ISO on it. And yeah, because there's different types of contamination, but they all are terrible and they all spread really fast. Because you're having the conditions for a fungi, you know? So we're trying to grow specific ones, but not all of them are good. We only want lion's mane and oyster and reishi and things like that. So we do varieties of oysters. Pink oyster, golden oyster, lion's mane, and then it comes a harvest. So then you simply go to the bag and you take it out. And then from there, you can do different things with it. So, and like I said previously, that's what I love about mushrooms. So we sell fresh produce that you can eat, and we just eat a lot of mushrooms. But also, we're really focused on the value-added products. So, show of hands, how many people know what mushroom tinctures are? Okay, not bad. Maybe more than I thought. So mushroom tinctures is kind of our bread and butter. So what mushroom tinctures are, there's a lot of medicinal benefits to lion's mane or reishi, depending on the mushroom. But a lot of those benefits you can't unlock those benefits when you eat it raw. Because you need a certain bio availability. And that's done through an extraction process. So with lion's mane, we have lion's mane and reishi tinctures, and we harvest it, we dehydrate it, we put it in big mason jars, we put high proof grain alcohol that starts the extraction process. And it's 2 months, and we got to be kind of shaking up the jars every day, and that's taking all those medicinal compounds and all the good stuff, and then There's some beautiful looking rishis there. Those might be my favorite, or very frustrating too, because they take over 2 months to grow. So you got to be patient for the rishis. But they're great for sleep. The reishi is known as the mushroom of immortality. It's great for your heart health, your cardiovascular system, and your circulatory system. So it relaxes your nervous system, and a lot of people take it for sleep to help them sleep. That's probably the biggest testimonial that we get is people taking reishi and they're sleeping much better. And that's just the small kind of one we started with dehydrator. So we'll just put it in there. Dehydrated mushrooms. There begins the first part of the extraction process. It's a dual extraction process. So the first part is 2 months of alcohol. Then you get it, we put it in a fruit press, we press every ounce out of it. Then we put mushrooms in water and we simmer it for about 2 hours. That's the second part of the extraction process that the alcohol doesn't get, but that process gets more of the medicinal compounds. And then we put it in 1 ounce droppers. And then, so you take about 1 dropper a day and you can put it, you can take it straight up if you want. It doesn't taste very good, but you can put it in your coffee. I just always have lion's mane in the morning, reishi at night. I just put lion's mane in my coffee. And yeah, a lot of people are really starting to see some great results. But yeah, there's been so many steps to this. So I remember when we first started with the bottling, we're trying to figure out like, okay, how do we get it in this little bottle? And we're doing it just by hand, and it took so long, and it was so frustrating. And we'd over pour it and have to clean it up, or we'd under pour. And I found this little machine, this little conveyor belt. We put it on, and it goes and it senses this nozzle that's hooked up to a jar, and then it dumps exactly 1 ounce in, and it's perfect every time, and I love it. There's so many steps like that it's just start out humble beginnings is what I like to say. You just humble beginnings, do things, without much sophistication, and then just add it as needed or as you can. And my parents, so eventually we were growing the mushrooms. There's lots of different things happening kind of at the same time. Transfarmation, I was partnering with them on this kind of pilot project, but at the same time, they were selecting 2 farms in the country to make a more sizable investment, because I was trying to build up the funds to renovate the hog barn, because that's a much larger project, and I knew it was gonna, building up this plan was gonna cost a decent amount of money. And they were selecting 2 farms to make a demonstration hub, and we were selected for that, which was very exciting. And basically they wanted the point of it is to showcase that change is possible and be this catalyst for change, but also meticulously collect all of the data. So we're collecting all the data and what the substrate is, how long it took, the temperatures, what went wrong, what went right, what the yields are with construction, how much everything costs, and to create this template, this model that other people can use. So one is just to inspire people that, hey, change is actually possible. But another one is just technical that, hey, like if you want to do it, here's how you do it. There's the lion's mane dark chocolate, hot chocolate. I think we have some back there for samples if anybody wants some after. And at the same time, also, I was doing a lot of advocacy work. I was just talking about the need, kind of the situation that we were in, and just talking about the possibility, the potential out there for all this existing infrastructure, all these people that were in the same boat as us. But we got this way for certain reasons. We got this way because certain policies were enacted that made it advantageous to have CAFOs, to consolidate. And the same changes could be made to move away from that. And there's a need for it. So they started taking me to the Hill, talking with Congress, talking with policymakers, working on the Farm Bill. And I really didn't think many people would want to listen, but people have been receptive. When you start talking, you have to know your audience. So obviously I come from the sustainability, environmental impact kind of realm. That's really where my passion is. But there's also just the job, the job loss, like I was talking about, and the job opportunity with the diversification and the cultural, saving that cultural identity by saving these family farms. So with some policymakers and some people, that's all I'll talk about. I don't even talk about how, the nitrate levels are at record highs because of all the waste that's leaching into the water system, and how Des Moines has to spend millions of dollars on a nitrate removal system and all these things. I'll talk about the positives. I'll talk about how this is a great opportunity. We have so much infrastructure, especially in the state of Iowa. It's just sitting out there. And there's just not many policies that make it easier. There's so many hurdles. And especially when you think of specialty crops, which it always drives me crazy how it's categorized as specialty crops. I mean, specialty crops is just fruits and vegetables, food that you eat. Why is that special? It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense how in the Farm Bill, such a small percentage goes to specialty crops. And the vast majority of it goes to commodities. And with commodities, you don't need that much help. You have the market built in for you. You don't have to worry about where you're going to sell your product. So I would talk about these things and go to their fancy, one of my favorite things, their fancy LA fundraiser, really crazy. The parent organization has much more money than in global reach than Transfarmation, who I work directly with. But I would go talk to their donors, and they have kind of a big Hollywood following. So I remember the first time they want to fly me to this red carpet event in LA, like, okay, why? Okay, but sounds fun, I'll go. And I go there and it's like Joaquin Phoenix and Billie Eilish and different people like that. I'm like, okay, what am I doing here? But people were so fascinated. They thought like it felt like I was the star there. Like, you're in Iowa? You're a farmer. You were a pig farmer, but you're growing mushrooms. Wow. What's that organization? And it's just, there's been such a pot. It started out as such an impossible challenge. And in my head, I did get wrapped around it. There's just a lot of naysayers and a lot of people saying it's a pipe dream, it's stupid, it won't work. And a lot of people that I grew up with. And a lot of family members. I mean, majority of my family members were very against this for a while. It took a while to get them on board. But as I talked to more groups and groups like CARES and other groups out there, there's a lot of people that want to see this change. And there's a lot of resources out there. And I just started, putting myself in those situations where, I'll go to wherever and I'll talk to whoever, and seeing that the response is just from just a mental aspect, it just really helped me, because it could be really intimidating, and you can feel a lot of pressure, especially when family is involved, if things don't go the way it's supposed to. And this hasn't exactly gone the way that it's supposed to. There's been lots of hurdles, lots of obstacles, it's taken a lot longer than I anticipated to get to where I am. And I still have a ton of more work to do. There's this at Farm Aid, great group at Farm Aid, Food Not Feed Summit. So that was a great opportunity to speak. we had to follow Cory Booker though, which that dude can talk. He got up there and he's just so animated and so passionate, and so into it, and people were standing ovation and crying, and then we had to go talk, and I'm like, oh, great. But then some good things started to happen. So sale, we're growing, we're working on the design, which took forever. And it was a bit of a brutal process to work with different organizations and different things happening, and too many cooks in the kitchen is what was kind of going on. But we're making the mushrooms, we're selling mushrooms through the website, we're selling, different places all around the country. But, we just started out. This is about a year. We started selling about a year ago. And then all of a sudden I get a phone call. It came from that Food Not Feed Summit. I did some interviews there, and then I got a follow-up interview call from the New York Times. And then that was a long kind of process, but then that story dropped. And that, I think, was one of the best days of my life, probably. We had notifications on our phone whenever a sale would come up, online. And all of a sudden, it's just bing, 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 bing. It just kept going. And it was nonstop sales for about 4 days. And luckily we had been building up a lot of inventory, but just the packaging and just and making the product, mixing everything, just the labeling and everything. I mean, it was, I had to get my nieces and nephews and my sister, the whole family was there, the aunts, uncles, neighbors, friends, some people I don't even know who they were. And that was a huge break that we got, because a lot of those are now repeat customers. And then we're having some funding problems to start, start the renovations with the pig barn. So what the plan was, almost all the money from those sales went to starting construction on the actual hog barn. And still to this day, it's kind of a phased project, but that was exciting. But I think the most rewarding, the most exciting thing for me was probably when we started excavating the lagoon, which it was pumped for one last time. And at this point, we were in it had been about a year since my parents felt comfortable with the business plan, and we formed the company, and I put in pretty much everything I had into the business, and the company bought the 2 hog barns and 6 acres kind of around it. And then my parents are minority owners, so they own 15% of the business too. My brother owns part of the company as well. And so we had to pump it one more last time, and then the pigs were gone, the buildings were empty. That was awesome. That was amazing. There was a documentary crew that's been kind of following me around from stage to stage, and they were kind of up on the hill trying to secretly record. It was the middle of the night, the last loading out of the pigs, and they're out there recording it. But then there's been 30 years of buildup of this manure, and we had to get rid of it. And I'm like, what can we do with that? A pond. Let's make a freshwater pond. But we have to excavate this. So one source of funding that did help, because I was constantly writing grants, I was constantly speaking with different organizations and with NRCS. So this was actually some partial funding that I got from NRCS for their EQIP program to remediate this lagoon, which cost about $20,000 to dig this out. So that was very helpful. But just to see that, to see them get going, I mean, it was about 5 feet. We didn't know what it would be because it's just been built up for years and years, but about 5 or 6 feet of just crud that is built up. So we had to get rid of all that and then form it out, reshape it a bit. And then we kind of devised this circulation system with a pump. So it's kind of circulating the water so you don't have stagnant water. And then we'll be stocking with fish in a couple weeks here. Very excited for that.
Oh.
And just to be able to track wildlife, I saw a turtle in it the other day. Very excited about that. Yeah. So the first part, to retrofit this hog barn is just it was a lot of demo. I mean, we have to take down feed lines, we have to take the feeders out, we have to some of it, we kept a lot of the walls, but some of the walls had to go. And we don't have a lot of heavy equipment. So we just had to take a sledgehammer and break our backs taking out some concrete walls. But it worked. There's my brother. He's usually not smiling. I don't know what's going on there. You won't see that very often. But as you can see, a lot of demo, taking out the curtains. And then where the slats are, we had to, the slats can't be there. There's the drain system. So we positioned the drains a certain way. But then most of the slats we had to cover with concrete. So we had this crazy person come and deliver this because we weren't sure if it was going to be able to happen because they had to drive in at a really weird angle and then come through the side there, and they dump a bunch of concrete in that section, and then we have to quick smooth it out and everything. But did that ourselves. And then we started with, a lot of this is pretty basic work, which to go back a little bit, one big mistake that we made, and the organization that I was working with, great people, but this is the first time they've done anything like this. And I think they were a bit worried and about a few things. One thing was liability, and they just really wanted it to be right. But I kept telling them, we could simplify this a bit and we could do the work ourselves. But for a while they wanted to have the general contractor, which we're just not used to. We do everything ourselves. We build the buildings there like ourselves. We're DIY all the way. And so finally we changed some things in the contract that allow us to not have the general contractor, which we were tied up in that for a while. And that took the bidding process, just took a long time. The price I knew would be greatly inflated. And so just with this one first section of enclosing the barn, which is just basically framing it out, getting everything nice and flush, so you can put steel up and put the soffits in nice and flush up there. Did make a big mistake with this with the mouse guard. We got the steel first, so we should have put up this mouse guard. But we're like, let's put the steel, then we'll just like shimmy that up there. That did not work. That was a nightmare. It was just a nightmare. But eventually we got it. But just this section which is, a pretty important thing to do to enclose this. And then on the inside, we have a 3-inch closed cell insulation. So that's good for moisture, kind of a moisture barrier, but also just great insulation because we want this to be an efficient system because it's got to be, temperature controlled. But we did this kind of working part-time because we're doing the mushrooms and everything too. And, a few of us in under 2 weeks, and doing it ourselves, we saved $80,000. $80,000. So that's when I think my partner organization kind of learned a lesson. Maybe they should put a little more trust in farmers, you know? So now it has turned into, we are doing everything ourselves, almost everything ourselves. And there we are there. It's my mom, Tammy, my dad, Rand, my brother, Tyler. And they're all smiling, they're happy. So they're definitely bought in now and they're all in. And it's just to see that slow progression is so rewarding. To see, my family were the least likely to do something like this. They were just not adapted, to change. My parents have never left the country. They hate traveling, rarely leave the state. My dad still works for the same company, going on, I don't know, over 4 decades. But now they love it. They love helping out with it. And my dad's about to retire, and that's great for me because hopefully he'll be helping more with mushrooms. And the rest of the family too. I mean, my younger brother, my twin sister, my grandpa, he just retired at the age of 92. This last year, he has corn and soybeans, and he used to have pigs. And now he's over all the time, just watching and wanting to help and asking questions. My uncle, who was just you would just not expect him to be into this, is just wanting to help, grab business cards and go, he's telling everybody. And a lot of the neighbors, I try to get a good sense of how people are feeling. I go to the Hubbard. I went to Hubbard Radcliffe High School, if anybody's heard of that, probably not. Very small, but and it's not around now, but the town of Hubbard still exists. And they have just a couple things. They have a Casey's and they have a bar. They have a pub. But I'll go there, and a lot of the row crop farmers are there. And I was there the other day, and I go in there because I still have some friends that live there, and I won't really bring it up. I won't go in, and I don't really try to advocate for this. I don't really try to push it in their faces. I just thought, they know what's going on. Eventually, I think they'll probably ask me about it. And they do, yeah. Now they ask me about it, and just one of the people that I would least expect, this farmer that has 5 hog confinement buildings, wants to ask me all. He just last week asked me all about it. And he's like, "Could I do this with my barns? What do you think?" And I'm like, "What?" Like, weren't you calling? Were you making fun of me? Like, somebody that's just been against it. And I think, especially when you get in certain cultures and especially certain atmospheres, people might say something because maybe they're expected to say that, or maybe they're just scared to really say what's on their mind. But I think people are more open to this change than they'll be vocal about. But they have to see it firsthand. And I think they have to maybe know someone who's doing it. And I think that really helps in their mind think, well, maybe we can do this. Not just with mushrooms, but, take an acre, take 5 acres and grow northern pecans or chestnuts, or there's all sorts of different things you could do to just diversify things and make more money. And then have your kids and future generations want to farm, want to do that. And that's what's happening here. If this change didn't occur, the farm probably would have been sold. And that would have been a shame. So this is kind of the layout for the hog barn is still currently in construction. So we're dividing up the rooms. We're putting in the HVAC system right now. So there are some changes that were made. One, because of the general contractor.
Oh,
We're moving from $450,000 to $15,000. And a lot of this is, so it's phased in. So this is the front, obviously the front of the building. We'll have the oysters over here. So we'll use kind of the same method with big tubs to sterilize the straw. And then on the other side, we'll have, we'll be mixing the soils and the wood pellets with the lion's mane and the reishi and turkey tail and different things like that. But instead of that small autoclave, we have a shipping container that's converted into basically the same thing. So envision that. I mean, right now we're able to do about 24 blocks at a time. That's like a big bottleneck for us. Then we'll be moving to that system where we can fit a lot in that. So basically the system right now, we can do about 500 pounds a week. And this will be in the 100% capacity, 5,000 pounds of mushrooms a week. So it'll be a game changer. And
I think maybe in the interest of time and keeping people here, would you have time to take some questions? I mean, finish up.
yeah, sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, just being at 8:15 here.
I did not. I was not paying attention to time.
You're rolling, man. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much plenty. I only have two slides left. So that is the pond. That's the old lagoon now. That's me jumping into it. That might be on the end of a documentary that will be coming out later. I can't. I'm not supposed to talk too much about, but keep your eye open. And with that, I'll take questions. Any questions? Don't be shy. Yes.
So your plan for expansion, what is your marketing plan? I guess meet your
Yeah, so the marketing is tough when it's a vital part of it with specialty crops. I made a huge mistake. One of the big mistakes I made was really wanting to spend too much money on marketing and hired a really bad marketing team and wasted a lot of money right from the get-go with everything was wrong, everything looked terrible, didn't follow through with anything. So one thing I learned was don't be in a rush. And a lot of the marketing has been free marketing from publications. The New York Times, the Guardian, the Des Moines Register, the different things, speaking engagements, spreading the word that way. And then the plan is I need to get into more authentic marketing, just myself, social media, blogs, newsletters, things like that. It's tough when you have to, there's always so much to do, but it is something I need to focus on. But yeah, right now there's a lot of repeat customers and just kind of around the country. But yeah, definitely need to up those sales, and just started selling wholesale like a month ago. Yes.
I'm curious about the depopulation of the rural areas around where your farm is and the potential for you to be increasing the workforce. What kind of workforce do you anticipate?
Yeah, so we'll have about 20 full-time employees and then several part-time employees. So there's a lot of people asking for jobs right now. So we hope to get to that point. I should be starting to hire additional people in probably late summer. Yes, sir.
Did your acreage ever grow beyond 25 acres?
No, it's still 25 acres, but what I love about that is just really showcasing what you could do with 25 acres. Just really think of land usage, every square inch. So what I didn't mention is a lot of the conservation efforts that we're doing as well. Because a big part of the marketing is people like the narrative, they like the story. And a big part of that story is being good stewards of the land. And so we have conservation efforts like we're planting 800 trees along the creek for a riparian buffer strip. We're doing an oxbow restoration. The pond, obviously, we have a large area designated for that we planted a prairie pollinator garden last year, and there'll be ongoing efforts like that. I planted northern pecans, so that'll take a while, but eventually that'll be producing some income. Expanding the fruit orchard, just really diversifying amongst, in this farm. And then incorporating ag tourism too. So that's something I really want to do. So that we have a large silo and I really want to retrofit that into kind of a destination short-term stay and bring people to the farm and let them experience, let them go pick an apple from the tree or, see the wildlife. And 'cause I think we've lost that connection. I think a lot of people, I talked my folks in for a little bit into hosting on Airbnb, and they said that's crazy, nobody's gonna come out here. And some people did, and I remember I was there once, and this family from I think it was Detroit, they were there, and the kid was outside, and just amazed, was like, "Whoa, you own all this? You must be bajillionaires." And then went to and then we're in the orchard, and the kid was just like, "Do you think, could I eat an apple? I want to eat an apple." Like, yeah, take it, eat it. It's like, what do you mean? Like, eat it. Well, you don't spray, there's no chemicals, it's eat the apple. And it was just, my mind was blown, that his mind was blown. It's like, so I'm really looking forward to that, and that's part of the contract too with the nonprofit is we're gonna be open to the public so people can take tours, organizations or people, policymakers, and they can see all these things in action. Yes.
I was wondering about the substrates. Can you grow those, the soy and the oats? And then what happens to the leftovers once the fungi are done with this?
Yes, good question. So yes, we can grow those. So right now we're buying the organic oat straw from a friend and a neighbor. But we're getting into, so we're using alfalfa as well, which is not very typical, but I've found in the mushroom industry, there's still a lot of unknowns. It's really shocked me where I try to research something and nobody knows. And I started using alfalfa as a substrate and it's going great. And then with the coffee, I hooked up with a local, partner with a local coffee roaster in Des Moines. And every time I get the coffee that goes in the Lion's Mane coffee blend, the coffee skins as a byproduct. So I use that in the substrate and that works great. But yeah, so using that alfalfa that, is interesting because the alfalfa has been feeding cows for over 100 years. And now it's feeding mushrooms. So I think that's that's kind of cool. But yeah, the plan is to be as vertically integrated as possible. Yes.
Hey, so, for other CAFO farmers and or commodity farmers, current commodity farmers who are looking to transition, which we know there's a number of in the state of Iowa, especially as the next generation gets involved. You know, you had a nice influx of cash coming in from transformation, and that kind of has that demonstration of effect you talked about. What do you recommend for other people to get that on the ground capital? Is policy change gonna need to happen for that sort of thing, or is there other investors, or, you know, how can they be guaranteed that they're gonna make it?
There are a lot of organizations out there that have grants available. So there are a lot of other grants and opportunities, but also I would say start small. Start small and grow. Because, you know, at the beginning of this, we were really thinking that we're just gonna dive right into this, and I'm not gonna grow any mushrooms until we're growing mushrooms in the hog barn. That would have been a terrible mistake, because it was relatively, you know, it didn't cost that much money to get the current operation set up. And then you learn about it, and you're making money that goes into the renovations. And then also, even with, like, what we're doing is the staging of the renovation. So we're not going completely, you know, full throttle and completing 100% of this right away. We'll start growing, actually growing oysters in there and mushrooms in there in about a month. But we won't be at 100% capacity, and the kitchen won't be in there yet. But we'll be phasing that out. You don't need to be totally intimidated and do everything all at once. Start small, make money from that, learn, and then tackle the bigger issues.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. What an incredible story or stories you've been telling us. And I know that's gotten much later than we expected. I was like just on the edge of my seat listening to you. So we're gonna quickly do our door prizes, right, Bill?
Door prizes